Victory is a dangerous word when you haven't read the fine print. Right now, Washington is taking a victory lap over the collapse of the Venezuelan regime. You are being told that American strength has returned, that a dictator has fallen, and that the Western Hemisphere is finally secure. But what if I told you that the only thing we have actually secured is a liability? While we celebrate the removal of a figurehead, the economic machinery of that state, the oil, the debt, the infrastructure, is still owned, operated, and leveraged by the Chinese Communist Party. We have effectively kicked down the door of a house that Beijing holds the mortgage on. And now, we are the ones paying for the repairs. This isn't just a foreign policy blunder. This is a systemic failure to understand how power works in the 21st century. We are trading our structural credibility for a fleeting spectacle, and we are handing our greatest rival a strategic win disguised as an American triumph. My name is Hiroshi Takamura. On this channel, we don't do comfortable lies. We do the math. If you are ready to look past the headlines and understand what is actually happening to American power, hit that subscribe button right now. Let's walk through the wreckage. The headlines are intoxicating. If you look at the surface, at the immediate feed of breaking news and bold declarations, what you see is a triumph of American will. A regime that has been a thorn in the side of the Western Hemisphere for decades has been dismantled. The strongman is gone. The visuals are striking. Decisive movement, the projection of force, the sudden collapse of a fortified political structure. It feels good. It feels like a return to a specific kind of American clarity. We acted, we struck, we won. And that feeling, that visceral sense of satisfaction, is exactly where the danger begins. Because what we are witnessing right now is not a conclusion. It is an entry point. We have confused the breaking of a lock with the securing of the house. We need to separate the spectacle from the strategy. The spectacle is undeniable. It is designed to be undeniable. It is calibrated for the 24-hour news cycle, for the rally stage, for the immediate projection of dominance. But dominance is not control. And in the modern world, in a globalized system defined by invisible flows of capital and leverage, the toppling of a government is the easy part. It is the cheap part. The difficult part, the expensive part, the part that actually determines whether the United States is safer or stronger tomorrow than it was yesterday, happens after the cameras turn away. We have to ask ourselves a very uncomfortable question. Did we just solve a problem, or did we just inherit a liability? The narrative being sold to you right now is simple. The bad actors are out, freedom is in, and America is back in the driver's seat. It relies on an outdated mental map of how power works. It assumes that if you control the presidential palace, you control the country. It assumes that if you remove the figurehead, you remove the influence of our rivals. This is a dangerous fiction. Modern power does not resolve at the moment of kinetic force. You cannot shoot a debt obligation. You cannot bomb a supply chain contract. You cannot arrest a dependency on foreign capital. When the dust settles on the physical operation, the economic reality remains exactly where it was, only now the United States owns the outcome. We own the chaos. We own the reconstruction. And most critically, we own the debt. Think about the timing. This action was sold as a masterstroke of strength, but strength without direction is just energy. It's heat. It dissipates. Real strategic power is about outcome, not output. If you knock down a wall, you have demonstrated strength, but if that wall was holding up the roof, you haven't demonstrated strategy. You've demonstrated recklessness. We are looking at a situation where the tactical success is masking a strategic void. There is no evidence, none, that the administration has accounted for the structures that were keeping that regime afloat. They have removed the political cover, but the underlying machinery of the state, the oil deals, the loans, the infrastructure entanglement, is still there. And it is not American machinery. By declaring victory today, we are effectively signing a blank check for tomorrow. We are telling the world that we are responsible for what happens next in Venezuela, without having secured the means to control it. We have planted the flag, but we haven't checked the foundation. The media framing reinforces this blindness. They focus on the win. They focus on the political scoreboard. Trump did what others couldn't. A decisive blow to socialism. These are slogans, not strategies. They obscure the long-term exposure we have just created for ourselves. We are celebrating the halftime score. We are acting as if the game ends when we score a touchdown, ignoring the fact that the other side is playing a completely different game, one that doesn't rely on speed or noise or shock and awe. True victory isn't about how loud the explosion is. It is about who holds the leverage when the smoke clears. And right now, we are declaring victory before we have even glanced at the balance sheet. We have bought the asset, but we have no idea how much debt is attached to it. And that is not a victory. That is a gamble. Let's turn the map over. Let's stop looking at the geography of borders and troops and start looking at the geography of money and energy. Because if you want to understand why this victory is hollow, you have to look at the invisible architecture that actually holds Venezuela together. For the last decade, while Washington was imposing sanctions and issuing condemnations, Beijing was pouring concrete. They weren't just buying oil, they were building the pipes that carry it. They weren't just supporting a dictator, they were writing the loans that paid the army. This is the fundamental disconnect. We look at Venezuela and see a rogue state that needed to be liberated. China looks at Venezuela and sees a collateralized asset. The power China holds in Caracas was never dependent on Nicolás Maduro. That is the mistake the administration made. They thought if you cut off the head, the body dies. But the body is on life support, and the machine keeping it alive is plugged into the Chinese banking system. China's influence is structural. It is embedded in oil-for-debt agreements that are designed to survive regime change. These aren't political handouts. They are commercial contracts. By removing the regime, we haven't broken those contracts. In fact, by stepping in to save the country, the United States has inadvertently made itself the guarantor of those debts. Think about the absurdity of this position. The United States Marines secure the port. The United States Treasury stabilizes the currency. American aid workers feed the population. And once the oil starts flowing again, where does the revenue go? It goes to service the debt owed to our primary strategic rival. We are effectively subsidizing the Chinese footprint in our own hemisphere. We focused on the surface layer, the politics, the flags, the speeches. We ignored the substrate. China doesn't care who sits in the presidential palace, as long as the crude flows east. They don't need to station troops in Venezuela because they have stationed engineers, creditors, and logistical dependencies. This is the asymmetry of modern conflict. We act with speed. They act with duration. We use military disruption. They use financial endurance. While the White House is taking a victory lap for a successful operation, Beijing is quietly recalculating the amortization schedule. They know that the United States cannot afford to let Venezuela collapse into total anarchy. We have to rebuild it. We have to get the economy working. And the moment we do, we turn the lights back on in a house owned by the Chinese Communist Party. We have applied 20th century American firepower to a 21st century economic web, and we missed the target completely. We seize the territory, but we do not control the value. The irony is bitter. We rushed in to stop foreign influence, to assert the Monroe Doctrine, to say, "This is our backyard." But you cannot evict a landlord by arresting the superintendent. The lease is still valid. The mortgage is still due. And now the United States is holding the bag. We have taken on the liability of a failed state, the cost of reconstruction, and the burden of security, all while the actual profits are siphoned off by an adversary who didn't have to fire a single shot. The real battlefield was never Caracas. It was the ledger. And we didn't even bring a calculator. This brings us to the core of the problem. We have to talk about the governing logic that made this decision possible. And we have to be very precise here. This is not about personality. This is not about rhetoric. This is about a fundamental distortion in how the United States projects power. We need to distinguish between national strength and impulsive dominance. They look the same on a television screen, but they function differently in the real world. Strength is durable. It relies on predictability, on the confidence of allies, on the certainty that when the United States moves, it moves with a purpose that aligns with the rules it created. Dominance, the brand of leadership we are seeing right now, is fleeting. It privileges the spectacle over the institution. It values the immediate submission of an adversary over the long-term stability of the region. The approach we are witnessing, let's call it what it is, Trumpism applied to grand strategy, is a structural liability. It treats international relations as a series of disconnected real estate deals. You push, you threaten, you break a norm, you get a signature, and you call it a win. But in geopolitics, you cannot treat your alliances and your credibility as disposable leverage. When we acted in Venezuela, we didn't just strike at Maduro. We struck at the consensus of the Western Hemisphere. We bypassed the hard, boring work of coalition building. We ignored the diplomatic channels that legitimize American force. We said, effectively, that the rules apply only when they are convenient for us. And when America acts like a rogue state to punish a rogue state, we lose the only thing that makes us different from China or Russia: our legitimacy. China is watching this, and they are delighted. They are not frightened by American unpredictability. They are empowered by it. Every time Washington acts unilaterally, every time we treat our neighbors as vassals rather than partners, we validate China's narrative. We prove their point for them. They tell the global South, look, the Americans talk about rules, but they only care about power. We offer you business. They offer you ultimatums. We are handing them a messaging victory that they could never have won on their own. We are dismantling the operating system of the free world. The network of alliances, the trust in international law, the belief that American security guarantees mean something, these are force multipliers. They make us stronger than our GDP or our military budget alone would suggest. When you govern by impulse, you erode that network. You turn allies into hedgers. You force countries like Brazil, Colombia, and even our European partners to ask themselves a dangerous question. Can we rely on the United States? Or do we need to cut a side deal with Beijing just to be safe? This is the strategic cost of the America First distortion. It isolates us. It strips the insulation off the wires of American power. We might feel strong in the moment of impact, but we are brittle. We are alone. We are trading the structural integrity of the American century for a sugar high of tactical aggression. And the terrifying reality is that even a successful operation, executed this way, becomes a strategic loss. You can win the battle for Caracas and lose the war for the hemisphere, simply because you treated the institutions that magnify your power as if they were obstacles to be smashed. Take a step back. I want you to look away from the map of Venezuela. Look away from the Pacific. Look at the horizon of the next 10 years. Because this isn't about one country anymore. It isn't about one election cycle. It is about the precedent we have just set for the rest of the century. By acting this way, by prioritizing the visual projection of force over the legal and diplomatic architecture of order, we have normalized a very dangerous, specific behavior. We have told the world that spheres of influence are back. We have announced that if you are a great power, your neighbors are not sovereign states. They are buffer zones. They are property. We might think we are the only ones allowed to play by these rules because we are the good guys. But the world doesn't work that way. When the United States validates the idea that might makes right, we strip away the only argument we have against Russian aggression in Europe or Chinese aggression in Taiwan. We cannot act as a chaotic imperial power in our hemisphere and then expect to be treated as a principled defender of liberty everywhere else. And the world is noticing. This is the part that doesn't make the headlines, but it is the part that kills empires. Nations act on survival instincts. When they see the United States behaving unpredictably, breaking deals, ignoring allies, swinging wildly between isolationism and intervention, they don't just sit there and hope for the best. They hedge. We are seeing the acceleration of a global move away from reliance on America. It is happening in Brasilia. It is happening in New Delhi. It is happening in European capitals. They are looking at this operation, and they are calculating that American guarantees are no longer sufficient collateral for their own security. They are diversifying their risk. That means more trade deals with China. That means distinct security arrangements that exclude Washington. That means a financial system that slowly, methodically detaches itself from the dollar because the dollar has been weaponized by a political whimsy rather than managed by institutional stability. We are watching the slow corrosion of our status as the organizer of the world. For 70 years, America was the hub. We wrote the code. Now we are just another player in the game, shouting louder than everyone else to prove we still matter. There is a profound difference between power exercised and power preserved. Every time you use the sledgehammer to solve a puzzle, you break the table. You might get the piece to fit, but you have destroyed the surface on which the game is played. We can keep doing this. We can keep claiming these manufactured victories. We can keep spiking the football every time we knock over a weak regime. But we are burning the furniture to heat the house. This trajectory is not sustainable. It is a form of strategic self-harm. You cannot maintain global leadership while actively dismantling the credibility that makes leadership possible. To reverse this, to actually secure American interests for the next generation, we need something that is currently in short supply. We need institutional discipline. We need to value the architecture of the house more than the noise of the renovation. Because if we continue on this path, we won't be defeated by China. We won't be defeated by a coalition of rivals. We will simply wake up one morning, surrounded by the wreckage of our own impulsive decisions, and realize that while we were busy winning the news cycle, we lost the world. Ren Aoyama.